What if everything we thought we knew about the Chris Watts case was just the surface? What if the monster who murdered his entire family has been hiding even darker secrets behind prison walls? In early January this year, new revelations have emerged from inside the Wisconsin prison where Chris Watts is serving multiple life sentences, and what he's finally admitting will shake you to your core. This isn't just another true crime story. This is the untold truth that's been buried for years. Before we dive into these shocking new developments, I need you to do something important. Take a moment to remember Shannon Watts, Bella Watts, Celeste Watts, and baby Nico, whose lives were stolen in the most horrific way imaginable. These weren't just headlines. They were real people with dreams, with futures, with love to give. Type amen in the comments right now to honor their memory and let their souls rest in peace. And while you're down there, tell me where you're watching from, because this case has touched people all around the world. And I want to know that I'm not alone in seeking justice for families like the Watts family. This is True Crime Footnotes, and I'm an unsolved case analyst. You might wonder what drives someone to dig through the darkest corners of humanity, to spend countless hours analyzing crime scenes, reading prison letters, and piecing together timelines that law enforcement sometimes misses. Let me tell you why. When I was growing up, I lost both of my parents to a violent crime. To this day, that case remains unsolved. To this day, my parents have never received justice. Every single day I wake up with that pain, and every single case I analyze, every family I fight for, is my way of making sure that what happened to my family doesn't happen to others. It's my way of ensuring that monsters don't get to hide in the shadows forever. So when I tell you that cases like Chris Watts trigger something deep inside me, I mean it with every fiber of my being. If my story resonates with you, type amen to my parents in the comments. They deserved better. Every victim deserves better. Now, let me be transparent with you. What I do isn't easy. Gathering this information is incredibly difficult. There are days when I feel like quitting. The challenges I face are enormous. Prison records? I pay significant amounts of money out of my own pocket to access them. Court documents? Sometimes they're sealed, sometimes they're redacted, sometimes I have to fight for weeks just to get a single page. Witness interviews? People don't always want to talk about the worst day of their lives. There are moments when I sit at my desk at 3 a.m., exhausted, frustrated, wondering if anyone even cares about the truth anymore. But then I remember Shannon. I remember Bella. I remember Celeste. I remember baby Nico. I remember my own parents. And I remember you, the people who come here seeking answers, seeking justice, seeking truth. So no, I will not quit. I will never quit. Let's go back to August 2018. Frederick, Colorado. A seemingly perfect family living in a picture-perfect home. Chris Watts, an oil field operator, appeared to be a devoted husband and father. Shannon Watts, his wife, was a vibrant woman who loved her daughters more than life itself. Bella, 4 years old, with her bright eyes and infectious laugh. Celeste, 3 years old, sweet and gentle. And inside Shannon's womb, 15 weeks along, was baby Nico, a boy they would never get to meet. On the surface, they were the American dream. But underneath, a nightmare was brewing. On August 13, 2018, Shannon returned home from a business trip in the early morning hours. By that afternoon, she and her daughters had vanished. Chris Watts went on television, playing the concerned husband, begging for their safe return. His performance was chilling. He stood there, fake tears in his eyes, pleading for someone to bring his family home, all while knowing exactly where they were. He knew because he had put them there. He had murdered his pregnant wife in their bedroom. He had smothered his 2 little girls, one after the other. And then he had driven their bodies to a remote oil site where he worked, dumped Shannon in a shallow grave, and stuffed his daughters into oil tanks. The world watched in horror as the truth unraveled. Chris Watts was arrested, and in November 2018, he was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 84 years for the unlawful termination of Shannon's pregnancy. He was sent to Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, where he would spend the rest of his miserable life. 4 years, he gave interviews, wrote letters, spoke to investigators, each time revealing a little more, changing his story, trying to manipulate the narrative. But what he's been saying in early 2026 is different. What he's admitting now cuts deeper than anything we've heard before. Here's where things get disturbing. According to sources who have had recent contact with what's behind bars, he has been making statements that contradict much of what he previously claimed. For years, Chris tried to paint himself as a man who snapped, a man who was under pressure, a man who made a terrible mistake in a moment of rage. But people who have spoken with him recently say he's dropping that facade. He's allegedly admitting that the murders were more calculated than he ever let on. That there was more planning involved. That he knew exactly what he was going to do before Sean and even walked through that door on August 13th. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. What kind of person plans the murder of their own children? What kind of darkness exists in someone's soul that they can look at their 4-year-old daughter, their 3-year-old daughter, and decide that they need to die? According to these new accounts from inside the prison, Watts has been expressing that he thought about it for longer than anyone realized. He allegedly researched. He allegedly prepared. And the most sickening part? He allegedly has no remorse. But it gets worse. And I need you to stay with me here because what I'm about to tell you is going to make your blood run cold. Inmates who have been housed near Watts report that he talks about Shanann, Bella, and Celeste in ways that are deeply disturbing. He doesn't speak about them with grief or guilt. According to these sources, he speaks about them with annoyance, as if they were obstacles in his path to a new life with his mistress, Nicole Kessinger. He allegedly has stated that he feels his life would have been better if he had gotten away with it. Think about that. Not that he wishes he hadn't done it, but that he wishes he hadn't been caught. One of the most chilling revelations from early this year involves what Watts allegedly told a fellow inmate about the moments before he murdered Bella and Celeste. Previously, Chris claimed that he killed the girls at the oil site, that they were alive during the drive, and that Bella witnessed him disposing of Shanann's body before he killed her and her sister. It was a horrific enough image, one that haunted everyone who heard it. But now, according to new testimony, that might not be the full truth. Some believe he's been lying about the timeline to make himself seem less monstrous, if that's even possible. There are whispers that Watts may have revealed the girls were already unconscious or worse before they even left the house. That the entire story about them being alive in the truck, about Bella asking if the same thing that happened to Mommy was going to happen to her, might have been a fabrication designed to create a specific narrative. Why would he lie about something so specific? Because even a family annihilator has a twisted sense of image management. He wanted people to believe he at least felt something in those final moments, that seeing Bella's fear affected him. But what if it didn't? What if the truth is that he's completely devoid of humanity? Now, you might be wondering why this matters. Why does it matter if the timeline is slightly different, if the details shift? He's already in prison for life. He's never getting out. But here's why it matters. Every lie Chris Watts tells is an insult to Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. Every manipulation is another layer of trauma for Shanann's family, for her parents who have to live every single day knowing what happened to their daughter and granddaughters. The truth matters because victims deserve the truth. Justice isn't just about a verdict. It's about accountability. It's about not allowing a killer to control the narrative from behind bars. If you're still watching, if you believe that the truth matters, if you believe that we owe it to victims and their families to keep digging, to keep questioning, to keep demanding answers, then I need you to do something for me. I can't do this alone. This channel exists because people like you care about justice. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing. Hit that notification bell. Because there are more cases like this, more families who need voices, more truths that need to be uncovered. And I promise you, I will never stop fighting for them. Let's talk about the outside witnesses. Because while Chris Watts has been rotting in prison, people on the outside have been talking. In late 2025 and early this year, individuals who knew Chris and Shanann have been coming forward with new information, new perspectives, new pieces of the puzzle that law enforcement might have missed or dismissed during the initial investigation. One witness, a former co-worker of Chris Watts at Anadarko Petroleum, has recently spoken about conversations they had with Chris in the weeks leading up to the murders. According to this co-worker, Chris was distant, distracted, and seemed to be living in a fantasy world. He would talk about his future plans, about traveling, about freedom, but never once mentioned his wife or children. When the coworker would ask about his family, Chris would change the subject or give vague, dismissive answers. Looking back, this coworker realizes that Chris had already mentally erased his family from his life. They were already dead to him, even though they were still alive. Another witness, a neighbor who lived a few houses down from the Watts family, has come forward with a disturbing recollection. On the morning of August 13, 2018, before Shannon was reported missing, this neighbor saw Chris loading items into his truck. At the time, they didn't think much of it. Chris was an oil worker. It was normal for him to have equipment and supplies in his vehicle. But now, knowing what we know, this neighbor is haunted by the possibility that what they saw being loaded into that truck that morning might have been the bodies of Bella and Celeste. The timeline fits. The behavior fits. And the weight of that realization has been crushing for this individual who innocently witnessed a piece of a horrific crime. There's also been renewed attention on Nicole Kessinger, the woman Chris was having an affair with at the time of the murders. Nicole has maintained that she had no knowledge of Chris's plans, that she was horrified when she learned what he had done, and that she cooperated fully with law enforcement. She has since disappeared from public view, changing her name and living in anonymity. But in early this year, people who knew Nicole during that time period have been speaking out. Some defend her, saying she was a victim of Chris's manipulation. Others aren't so sure. They point to internet searches she made before the murders, searches about Shannon Watts, searches about mistresses of killers, searches that suggest she might have known more than she let on. To be clear, Nicole Kessinger has never been charged with any crime related to this case. But the questions remain. One particularly troubling account comes from someone who claims to have had a conversation with Nicole after the murders but before Chris was arrested. According to this person, Nicole seemed more concerned about how the situation would affect her reputation than about the missing family. She allegedly asked if people would find out about the affair, if her name would be in the news, if her life would be ruined. When this person tried to express concern for Shannon and the girls, Nicole allegedly became defensive and ended the conversation. Again, this is second-hand testimony, and we must be careful not to convict someone in the court of public opinion without evidence. But it adds another layer to an already complex and disturbing case. Here's something that's been bothering me, and I want your opinion on it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Nicole Kessinger knew more than she admitted? Do you think she had any suspicion that Chris might harm his family? Or do you believe she was genuinely blindsided by his actions? This isn't about attacking someone who hasn't been charged with a crime. This is about understanding how a monster like Chris Watts was able to function in society, how he was able to fool so many people, and whether there were warning signs that were missed or ignored. Tell me what you think. I read every single comment. Now let's talk about Shannon's family because their strength through all of this has been nothing short of extraordinary. Frank and Sandra Zusk, Shannon's parents, have had to endure unimaginable pain. They lost their daughter, their granddaughters, and their unborn grandson all in one horrific act of violence. And yet, they have shown grace, dignity, and an unwavering commitment to keeping Shannon, Bella, Celeste, and Nico's memories alive. In recent months, they have spoken about how difficult it is every time Chris Watts gives a new interview or makes a new statement. Every time he opens his mouth, they are forced to relive the worst day of their lives. In early January this year, Frank Zusk gave a statement expressing his frustration with the continued media attention on Chris Watts. He said that every time Chris is given a platform, it takes attention away from the victims. He urged media outlets, content creators, and the public to stop glorifying the killer and to instead focus on the beautiful lives that were stolen. And he's right. He is absolutely right. That's why in this video, I've tried to balance the need to expose the truth about Chris Watts with the need to honor Shannon, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. They are the ones who matter. They are the ones we should be talking about. Shannon Watts was a loving mother, a devoted wife, a successful businesswoman, and a friend to many. She was passionate about health and wellness, she loved her girls fiercely, and she was excited about the arrival of her baby boy. Bella was a bright, intelligent little girl who loved school and playing with her sister. Celeste was sweet, gentle, and had a smile that could light up a room. Nico, who never got the chance to take his first breath, was already so loved, already so wanted. These are the lives that mattered. These are the people we should remember. As we approach what will be nearly 8 years since the murders, the question remains, what else is Chris Watts hiding? Is there more to this story that we don't know? Are there other victims, other secrets, other lies that have yet to be uncovered? Some investigators believe that Chris Watts is the type of person who would only kill if he felt trapped, that the murders of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico were an anomaly, a perfect storm of circumstances that led to an explosion of violence. But others aren't so sure. They point to the level of planning, the lack of remorse, the ease with which he disposed of the bodies, and they wonder if this was really the first time Chris Watts had killed. There's no evidence to suggest that Chris Watts murdered anyone before his family. But there are questions. Were there other instances of violence in his past that were overlooked or covered up? Were there animals that went missing in neighborhoods where he lived? Were there women who had unsettling encounters with him that they brushed off as nothing? These are questions that may never be fully answered, but they are questions worth asking. Here's what we know for certain. Chris Watts is a narcissist, a sociopath, and a family annihilator. He is someone who values his own comfort and desires above the lives of others, including his own children. He is someone who lies with ease, who manipulates without conscience, and who will continue to try to control the narrative for as long as he draws breath. And that's why it's so important that we don't let him. That's why channels like this exist. That's why I spend my own money, my own time, my own energy digging into these cases. Because someone has to stand up for the victims. Someone has to make sure their stories are told truthfully. You know, there are moments when I'm sitting at my desk, surrounded by case files, crime scene photos, witness statements, and I just feel this overwhelming weight. I think about my own parents, about how their case has gone cold, about how the person who took them from me is still out there, living their life while I live with this void. And then I think about families like the Zusks, who have to see their daughter's killer's face every time they turn on the news or scroll through social media. It's not fair. It's not right. But it's reality. And the only way we can change that reality is by demanding better, by supporting each other, by refusing to let these cases fade into obscurity. If that resonates with you, if you believe in what we're doing here, then become part of this community. We're growing every single day, and it's because of people like you. Let's talk about prison life for Chris Watts because it's not what you might expect. Despite being one of the most hated men in America, Chris has reportedly adapted to life behind bars relatively well. He's in protective custody, which means he's separated from the general population to prevent him from being attacked by other inmates. He has access to religious services, he works in the prison, and he reportedly spends his time reading, working out, and writing letters. Some of these letters have been leaked to the public, and they reveal a man who is still trying to manipulate, still trying to paint himself as a victim, still trying to garner sympathy. In one letter written in late 2025, Chris wrote about how he's found God in prison, how he's been praying for forgiveness, and how he hopes that one day people will see him as more than just a monster. He talks about his daily routine, about the small joys he finds in prison life, about how he's trying to make the best of his situation. Reading these letters is infuriating. Because while Chris Watts is finding small joys, Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico are in the ground. While Chris Watts is working out and reading books, Frank and Sandra Zusk are visiting graves. While Chris Watts is writing letters about redemption, there are two little girls who will never write letters, never read books, never experience the joy of a single additional day of life. But here's the thing that keeps me going, and I hope it keeps you going too. As long as we remember them, they're not truly gone. As long as we say their names, as long as we fight for justice, as long as we refuse to let their stories be forgotten, Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico live on. That's the power we have. That's the power Chris Watts can never take away. Now, I want to address something that I've seen in the comments on other videos about this case. And it's something that deeply troubles me. There are people out there who victim blame Shanann. They criticize her parenting, her use of social media, her involvement in multi-level marketing, her relationship with Chris. They dissect her life looking for flaws, as if finding a flaw would somehow justify or explain what Chris did to her. Let me be absolutely clear. Shanann Watts could have been the most difficult person in the world, and it still would not justify what happened to her. Nothing, and I mean nothing, justifies murdering your spouse and children. Shannon was not perfect because no human being is perfect. But she was a victim of domestic violence and ultimately a victim of femicide. She deserves our compassion, not our judgment. The same goes for the criticism of Bella and Celeste. I've seen people analyze videos of the girls, trying to diagnose them with behavioral issues, suggesting they were difficult children. First of all, they were children. Second of all, even if they had been difficult, does that matter? Does a child's behavior justify murder? The answer is no. Unequivocally, no. These were innocent little girls who trusted their father, who loved their father, and who were betrayed in the worst possible way. If you see anyone victim-blaming Shannon, Bella, or Celeste, I want you to stand up for them. I want you to speak truth. I want you to shut down that toxic narrative. They can't defend themselves anymore. So we have to do it for them. As we move forward this year, there are ongoing efforts to ensure that Chris Watts never receives parole, never receives clemency, and never walks free. Although he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, there are always legal mechanisms, technicalities, and loopholes that can potentially be exploited. Victim advocacy groups are monitoring his case closely, ready to oppose any attempt to reduce his sentence or grant him any form of early release. If you want to support these efforts, there are petitions you can sign, organizations you can donate to, and voices you can amplify. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Justice doesn't end with a verdict. It requires constant vigilance. There's also been discussion about creating a permanent memorial for Shannon, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. While they have grave markers, some advocates believe there should be a public memorial, a place where people can come to pay their respects, to reflect on the fragility of life, and to commit themselves to preventing future tragedies. Whether this will come to fruition remains to be seen, but it's a beautiful idea. A place where their names are spoken with love, where their lives are celebrated, where their memory is preserved for generations to come. I want to take a moment to talk directly to anyone watching this who might be in a dangerous relationship. If you are with someone who scares you, who controls you, who makes you feel like you're walking on eggshells, please know that you are not alone. There are resources available to help you. Domestic violence hotlines, shelters, legal advocates, counseling services. You do not have to stay. You do not have to suffer in silence. Shannon Watts likely had no idea that her husband was capable of what he did. There may not have been obvious warning signs. But if you are seeing warning signs in your relationship, if your gut is telling you something is wrong, please listen to it. Your life is valuable. Your children's lives are valuable. And there are people who want to help you. For those of you who have been with me from the beginning of this video, thank you. I know this has been heavy. I know it's been difficult. But this is the reality of true crime. It's not entertainment. It's not a puzzle to solve for fun. It's real lives, real families, real pain. And if we're going to engage with these stories, we have an obligation to do so with respect, with integrity, and with a commitment to truth. So let me ask you this. What do you think happens next in the Chris Watts case? Do you believe he'll continue to give interviews and make statements, trying to control the narrative from behind bars? Do you think there are more revelations to come, more secrets he's been hiding? Or do you think we've heard everything there is to hear, and now it's just a matter of ensuring he stays locked away forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's have a real conversation about this. And here's my final ask. If this video impacted you, if you learned something, if you felt something, if you believe in the work we're doing here at True Crime Footnotes, then please share this video. Share it with someone who cares about justice. Share it with someone who followed this case. Share it with someone who needs to understand that true crime is about more than just morbid curiosity. It's about remembrance. It's about accountability. It's about making sure that victims are never forgotten and killers are never glorified. Chris Watts wanted to erase his family and start a new life. He failed. Shannon, Bella, Celeste, and Nico are remembered, loved, and mourned by millions of people around the world. Their names will be spoken long after Chris Watts is forgotten. And that, in the end, is the truest form of justice. Not just the prison sentence, but the legacy. The victim's legacy of love, and the killer's legacy of shame. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of this community that refuses to let the darkness win. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and never stop fighting for justice. This is True Crime Footnotes, signing off. Rest in peace, Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. You are loved. You are remembered. You will never be forgotten.